This video covers the general tank removal procedure for common two-piece toilets. These come in many shapes and sizes, but all are designed with a separate tank and bowl held together with long bolts. Our standard Flush Saver dual flush kits require that the tank be removed for installation. The advantage of removing the tank and installing a standard dual flush kit is that the entire flapper mechanism and gasket are replaced, so it's a more thorough overhaul. On the other hand, our easy fit drop-in dual flush kits install over top of the existing flapper valve body and do not require a tank removal. So after watching this video, you can better decide which kit works best for you. Removing the tank is really not all that hard or time consuming for the average home do-it-yourselfer, but it can be a little messy or tricky depending on the age and condition of the hardware. But not to worry, we'll show you how to remove it quickly and easily and address some of the potential problems you may run into. Before starting your tank project, I recommend you watch this video in its entirety so you can gather the proper tools and consider the hardware issues for your particular toilet. If you want to go ahead and get the tools together now, then you'll likely need a medium flat blade screwdriver, medium Phillips screwdriver, tongue and groove pliers, these are commonly referred to as channel locks, and a medium adjustable wrench. You may also need a hacksaw blade if your tank bolts are excessively corroded or otherwise difficult to remove, so you can simply cut them loose. Then you'll need some old towels for the floor, a couple of small containers for bailing out the tank water, I'm going to use some plastic food containers here, and a large sponge for swabbing out the tank. The first step is to put down some old towels on both sides of the toilet, right below the tank bolts and water fill line from the wall. No matter how careful you are, some water and debris will leak onto the floor during disassembly, so best to go ahead and prepare for that. Next, we'll turn off the water supply to the tank at the wall spigot. Now, we'll remove the tank lid, flush, and continue to hold the flush handle down to drain as much water out as possible. The more water we can get out through the drain now, the less time we'll have to spend bailing and sponging in the next step. I've got two plastic food containers here, one smaller for bailing and one larger for collecting. If your sink or tub is right nearby, you can of course bail directly to it, but I find this method quick and tidy. Again, we want to get out as much water as we can so as not have to spend a lot of time sponging out in the next step. And finally, we'll use a large sponge to swab out the rest of the water until the tank is completely empty. Remember that any water left in the tank is going to run out onto those towels on the floor when we remove the tank, so we want to minimize that amount best we can. Now that we have the tank emptied out, we'll identify all the parts inside that we'll be removing. It's easier to remove some parts while the tank is still mounted, and then others when the tank is removed. While the tank is still mounted, we'll disconnect the flapper chain and remove the flush handle mechanism. Then we'll remove the tank bolts and lay the tank down so we can get to the filler and flush valve nuts from the bottom. We'll start the tank removal process by disconnecting the water line from the filler valve. If the nut on yours has finger tabs, then you should be able to loosen it by hand. If not, then use a tongue and groove pliers, channel locks, to break it loose. Even though the tank is good and empty, some water remains inside the filler valve and will run out when disconnected, but it won't be much. Now, back inside the tank, we'll disconnect the lift chain from the flapper valve. This is usually held on by a simple chain clip. Next, we'll remove the flush handle assembly. If the nut does not have finger tabs for easy loosening, you'll probably have to use an adjustable wrench to break it loose. But from there, it will spin right off. Note that the nut on most flush handle assemblies is a left-hand thread, so you'll loosen it by turning it to the right. Before we remove the tank bolts, let's take a look at the different types you may run into. The most common and often hardest to remove are the brass flatheads. The problem with these bolts is that they have a shallow screw slot in the head, which makes them difficult to hold with a screwdriver. They also tend to use flat, hard rubber washers inside the tank, which don't seal that well and often seep or leak over time. This causes the bolt and nut below to corrode and ultimately fuse together. However, the brass bolts are soft and can be cut with a hacksaw blade if they won't unscrew easily. We'll address that potential problem when we remove the bolts. A better choice for tank bolts are nylon, or more technically polyoxymethylene, POM, or PALM for short. These are nice because they are just about as strong as brass, include leak-resistant cone washers, and won't corrode. Plus, they usually have a finger tab for easy installation and removal. The disadvantage of the palm bolts is that they are a larger diameter for added strength, so won't fit some tank holes. The bolts shown here that we sell with our kits are 3/8 inch diameter instead of 1/4 like the brass bolts. Also, they are not quite as strong as brass, so if your tank is not supported up against a wall like most tanks, there is some risk that the tank could get leaned on enough to break them. The best choice for strength, leak resistance, and corrosion resistance are the stainless steel bolts. These bolts have an easy grip Phillips head, leak-resistant cone washer, and a secondary nut and washer stack for a more positive mounting to the tank. They also include a lower cushion washer and wing nut for easy installation by hand under the bowl. Since they are stainless steel, they are not only corrosion resistant, but also the smallest diameter. The ones shown here that we sell with our kits are only 3/16 inch in diameter, so will fit any size tank mount hole. All of our kits can be purchased with either the palm or stainless steel bolt sets, and we also sell bolt kits separately for anyone simply wanting to replace their troublesome brass bolts. This toilet has the common flathead brass bolts, so we'll use a regular screwdriver from above and an adjustable wrench below to remove them. If the bolt and nut are corroded or otherwise hard to remove for any reason, we'll just use an old plumber's trick and slip a bare hacksaw blade in between the tank and bowl to cut them loose. This is much easier to do than it sounds because there's usually plenty of gap between the tank and bowl, and the brass bolts cut very easily. As we're removing the bolts, it's a good idea to keep one hand on the tank at all times to stabilize it. If the tank strains against the loosened bolts too much, it can chip the bolt holes or even break out the bowl mount, so this is where we need to be careful. Once we have the bolts out, we simply keep our grip on the tank with one hand while we put one of the floor towels up on the seat with the other. Then using both hands, we'll lift up and out slightly on the tank, then lay it down on the seat with the flatter backside down. With the tank off and lying down, removing the rest of the parts is easy. We'll remove the fill valve first by pressing down on it from inside the tank with one hand and twisting off the nut below with the other. If the nut is too tight for hand removal, just break it loose with the channel locks. Similarly, we'll press down on the flapper valve from inside and remove the large collar nut from it. If that nut is too tight for hand removal, then try using a glove or even cut across it with that hacksaw blade to split it open. This concludes the tank removal process. From here, we'll just clean everything up and ready for installing the new parts. If you'll be installing one of our standard dual flush kits, then continue on to those videos for the installation process and tank reassembly. Thank you.